Hey guys, my name is Batimio, and today I wanted to make a list of what weapons I would love to see in a future DLC for Battlefield 4. Dragon's Teeth, the next expansion pack, isn't necessarily just around the bend. It's probably going to take another couple of months before it launches, but I thought it would be pretty cool just to speculate as to what weapons I loved in previous Battlefield titles or in previous first-person shooters, and why I would love to have them in the future DLCs. And so the first one that I have to mention is the fan favorite AN-94. This was a very popular weapon back in Battlefield 3, and especially if you played on consoles. I don't know what it was about the console version, but people loved it. Like, everyone I talked to that played a console version of that game adored this weapon, and it was for good reason. It was unique, it was amazing at taking out targets at long range, it had amazing accuracy, but one of the most unique aspects of it is that normally, if you had it in fully automatic mode, it only had a rounds per minute of, I believe, 600, but if you had it in burst fire and you were good enough, that RPM skyrocketed all the way up to 1,200. And so if you got good with this weapon and you pulled the trigger, you knew exactly where your bullets were gonna land. Like, those first two bullets that came out of the chamber hit the same exact target. Like, the RPM was insane, the accuracy was incredible, and so when people got good with the AN-94, you were able to get headshots and drop people almost instantaneously. Like, this weapon was simply amazing. But where I fell in love with this weapon was actually all the way back in Bad Company 2. Back in that game, this was a quote-unquote overpowered weapon. It hit extremely hard, it was amazingly accurate, and because pretty much every weapon in the game, even if you were using an automatic weapon, you still needed a burst fire, its burst fire capabilities wasn't a hindrance to you. Like, even if you were up close, everyone was basically still having to burst fire no matter what, and so it wasn't a hindrance at all. And so because of that, and because of its high damage model and insane accuracy, pretty much everyone was using this on the battlefield. And so if I remember right, it's been a long time since I've remembered those patch notes, but I believe DICE went in and nerfed the AN-94 back in Bad Company 2. But even still, it was easily one of my favorite weapons in the game, and so I would love if this was introduced in the upcoming DLC. But the one weapon that I would giggle like a little schoolgirl if it was reintroduced is the XM8. This gun was so cool back in Bad Company 2, but I think the main reason why it hasn't been reintroduced is that I don't believe any modern militaries are currently using it in service. I could be wrong, but I'm almost 100% positive that the United States doesn't use this gun. But I do know that the main reason why this project started and why this gun was created is that they were searching and trying to create a cheaper, lighter, and more effective M16 or M4 carbine. Like, that was the main reason why they started this prototype. And I'm assuming the project wasn't as successful as they were hoping it to be. I'm assuming that's why people, or a lot of militaries, aren't using it right now. But what's so cool about it is that if you want to use it as an assault rifle, you can do so. But if you have a couple extra parts laying around, you can reassemble it and actually make it into a light machine gun. And what's awesome about it in Bad Company is they also had the light machine gun version of it. If you wanted to play as the medic, the support class, you could run around with this bad boy, and it was easily one of the best light machine guns in the game. Like, it simply was incredible. And so the concept is cool, it looks amazing, and while I wouldn't say it was one of the better assault rifles in the game, it was good. Like, don't get me wrong, I loved how it performed, I loved how it felt, it hit very hard, but it was just such a fun concept, it was just such a fun weapon, and I would love if they reintroduced this into Battlefield 4. Another weapon that I would love to see reintroduced is the M5K. This weapon was ridiculous back in Battlefield 3, and if I remember right, when it was introduced with the Close Quarter DLC, everyone ran with it. Like, it was pretty much broken. It had an amazing hipfire accuracy, a high RPM, and I can't remember exactly what DICE did to tweak its stats. I want to say they reduced its long-range killing potential. Maybe they increased its recoil and also reduced its damage, but it's still, to this day, it is amazing. Like, if you round the corner, you see 5 guys in front of you, you're going to be able to take pretty much every single one of them out with this gun, as long as you are consistent with all of your shots. You're probably going to have to do some cleanup with your pistol, but its hipfire accuracy, its high damage, and the fact that it had an amazing rounds per minute simply made it one of the best close encounter weapons in the game. And on top of that, it was also for every single class. Like, it was a personal defense weapon, and so if you wanted to play as an aggressive recon, let's say you didn't want to use one of the LMGs in the game, you could slap on the M5K and just destroy people with it. Like, this was easily one of my favorite weapons back in the day, and I would absolutely love if they reintroduced this in the DLCs. And then the final one on my list isn't the M16A3? This was easily one of the best weapons back in the day. Like, the M16A3 was extremely popular, and for good reason, and it mainly just came down to the fact that it was fantastic in pretty much every single combat scenario. It had an amazing rounds per minute that allowed it to do well up close. It still had the accuracy to take people out at long range, and as long as you were able to manage the recoil and get accustomed to the way that the weapon performed, it was basically the dominant gun in the game, and everyone gravitated on towards it. And while it was cool back in Battlefield 3. Like, I got my use out of it. I spent hundreds of hours using this weapon. At the same time, it's like I've gotten my fill with it so far. And while I would not be opposed to it being added into the game, the one I would rather see is actually the G3A3. Now, this was a very fun and unique gun. And while I guess you could make the argument that the Scar H is pretty much identical to the G3A3, there's just something about this gun in Battlefield 3 that clicked with me. And one of the tactics that I love to use was actually to use a higher optic, even like the 8x scope with this, and put it into single fire mode, and then just snipe people at medium to long range. It was by no means the best setup in the game. Like, don't get me wrong, the G3A3 was not overpowered. It was nowhere near as good as the M16A3, but it was just a fun and satisfying gun to use. Like, it was the battle rifle. It was like using a designated marksman rifle, but for the assault class. Didn't hit as hard, but as long as you were accurate, as long as you were able to get around the fact that it did have some weaknesses, it just was an incredibly fun weapon to use. And so if I had to choose between the G3A3 and the M16A3, I know that many of you are gonna think I'm crazy, I would actually prefer the G3A3 because it did feel so unique. But overall, going back and playing with all of these weapons in Battlefield 3 and in Bad Company 2 really solidified why I love them so much back in the day. They all had their unique playstyle, they all had their strengths and weaknesses, but the main solidifying property of all of them is that they were an absolute blast to use. Like, every single time I picked up one of these weapons, I knew I was gonna have a good time, and if they were just able to take that same uniqueness, take that same flair, and add it into Battlefield 4, I think that these would be perfect for the game. But before I go, I quickly wanted to mention, because I noticed it during my play session, was just how ridiculous suppression was back in Battlefield 3. It's nowhere near as bad as it was. Like, I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was like a 2 or 3 month period where if you were sniping and you were fully suppressed, the amount of bullet deviation on your sniper rifle was so bad that even if someone was right in front of you and you lined up your shot, you would miss the shot because the bullet deviation would just have it flying everywhere. And while it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be, it's still incredible going from Battlefield 4 where you have to deal with weapon sway. Like, admittedly, that does get a little annoying, but at least your screen isn't blurring all the time and making it so you can't even figure out what's going on around you, and at the same time having to deal with bullet deviation. Like, it was nice going back and playing this game. I had a lot of fun, but it really made me appreciate that DICE did make that slight tweak, because I don't know about you guys, but having your screen blurry constantly, having your bullets flying everywhere was one thing that I was glad was in the past with Battlefield 3. But that's about it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what weapon you would like to see added into Battlefield 4. Is it the M16A3? Do you think I'm crazy? Do you want to have the AN94, have another burst fire weapon added into the game? Let me know down below. But until tomorrow, have a good one and take it easy.